Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
Thanks for being with me on another edition of Liberty with Love with Robin Koerner. Today I get to speak to a good friend of mine whom I've not spoken to in quite a while. But since I spoke to her last time, she's kind of, got herself lots and lots of attention. And I don't know, I think it's probably fair to say some wanted and some unwanted. But welcome back to the show, KrisAnne Hall.
Thank you, Robin. It's been way too long for us. It really has.
It has, and we keep talking about, sending messages to each other that, we'll do a show and we'll talk and whatever, but you're so busy. I mean, I'm busy, but you're really busy. I mean, you make me look like a layabout, to be honest. But,
and every time I try to talk to you, you're out of the country, so...
That's true. It happens quite a lot. Yeah, it happens quite a lot. And the thing, I mean, for the listeners who don't know who you are, because they would have to traipse back through the archives to find out the shows that we've done before. KrisAnne Hall, my friend and the guest today, is a constitutional attorney who spends an awful lot of time, like 260 days a year, flying around the country teaching not just the Constitution, but the genealogy of the Constitution, i.e. where it comes from. And to really know what something is, you kind of have to know its origin. So, and I'm going to plug you right off the bat. KrisAnne Hall's work on the Constitution is fantastic. Your site is KrisAnneHall.com, right?
Yes, that's right. KrisAnnehall.com.
Right. And so people who have been listening to my show for a long time know that I'm all about your work, and may know actually that we've done a little bit of stuff together, haven't we, talking about the Constitution on a stage here and there.
We have.
Which has been a lot of fun. We really have to do that again. But apparently you're really evil. You're evil and crazy, according to
No. Not crazy, extreme.
Oh, extreme. Is that different? I suppose that's kind of different, yes. Well, you're a dangerous extremist, because you believe in such things as natural rights and the Constitution. They're absolutely deadly. Whatever next. And according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and also, was it the Washington Post recently?
The Washington Post, yes. The Washington Post just recently did a cover article on me.
Yes.
The author, and I'm so terrible with names. Let me look up his name. His name is Kevin Sullivan. Yeah, Kevin Sullivan. He's a really, really nice guy. He actually attended 2 of my events.
Okay.
Just to see what it was exactly that I was teaching and to talk to some of the people who came to my classes. So he really is a real kind of journalist, not what you would expect, or what we're used to seeing these days.
Yeah.
He's actually a Pulitzer Prize winner and not a millennial. So he's an older guy with real journalistic experience and prides himself in that.
Okay, so before we talk more about that, this is one of the first show. I mean, it's actually the second show since that I've recorded since Trump's election victory. What do you make of it, if anything? Where is the country at right now, KrisAnne, would you say?
Well, I think if there's one thing that the Trump election proves is that America is not as divided as the corporate media and the politicians want us to believe that we are. If you look at the demographic that voted for Trump, you have a large number of Latinos, a large number of women. You have a large number of Democrats who voted for Trump. And so you can't really come around. Oh, and the Black America voted for Trump. You can't come out and say that we are racially and socially divided when you have an election like that, where all these different people are voting for a Republican candidate.
Now,
And
just to be clear, the Hispanic vote for Trump was higher than people expected at about 30%, but the black vote was only about 8%. It was up a long way from, say, 2% for Romney, but it was basically only 8%, right?
Still, that's up from Romney, and I think that's I think that's significant, especially considering the rhetoric that was being passed around about the Black America and Donald Trump.
Well, as one of the greatest constitutional experts I ever have the pleasure of speaking to, KrisAnne, what do you make of Donald Trump with respect to his respect or lack of it for the Constitution? Certainly for me, as I was listening to him on the campaign trail, he was saying some good things, Second Amendment stuff, et cetera, et cetera. There's a few. But then he'd say some horrifying things like, First Amendment stuff. Let's just shut down the New York Times because we don't like them. To the point that I just didn't feel like I could vote for a guy like that in good conscience. But it's... What do you make of it? Is he going to be a destroyer of the Constitution or an upholder of it, or a bit of both?
I don't know that we can tell at this point. I did, on my radio show, I did a 5-day series where I looked at the platforms of 6 different presidential candidates. And what I did was I took their published platforms from their websites and compared each of their platforms to the Constitution. So I don't believe in judging the candidates amongst themselves. I believe we must hold them to the standard, which is the Constitution. And there wasn't a single presidential candidate that marked up to the Constitution when it came to their platform. So every single one of them promised things and promised to do things that the president simply does not have the authority via the Constitution to do. So we're starting off at a bit of a disadvantage with people who simply are not on the right path of constitutionality. And in doing that survey, Robin, it really struck home to me. What is the purpose of the platform? The purpose of the platform is to answer the question that the people ask, what will you do if you become president? So the platform on the website is saying, this is what I will do if I am president, and I'm answering the question of the people. And I think the bottom line is the problem is not with the presidential candidates. The problem is that the people of America have become universally ignorant as to the proper place and role of the president of the United States. And we're constantly asking the president to do things that he's not authorized to do. And so in our ignorance, we are expanding the authority of the executive branch, and the president and the presidential candidates are simply responding to the demand of the people. It would be very difficult in this day and age to actually run as a constitutional candidate for president. First thing you would have to say is, I will not be selecting a running mate, because selecting a running mate is completely unconstitutional.
Yeah.
The vice president is supposed to be elected in the same separate ballot manner as the president. Then the president would have to say, I'm not going to have anything to do with your taxes. That's a job that is reserved to the Congress. I'm going to demand that Congress bring our troops home until they declare a formal declaration of war. I'm sorry, I'd love to raise the troops' salaries. I would love to increase the armament for the troops. I would love to be able to do things for our soldiers, but unfortunately, that is also a role that is reserved to Congress. So you're getting the kind of feel of this. You would go along and you would have to be saying all of these things that you want me to do, I can't do because they're not my job. And I think you'd really have a hard time finding people that would vote for that kind of president.
I agree with you. And this is actually why I wasn't going to talk about this, but that's so spot on. That's why my book that I recently published is called If You Can Keep It, because it's all kind of premised on the fact that it all starts with the demands of we the people, right? Just as indeed it says in our founding documents, it's about we the people. And politicians largely can only do what we allow them to do. So really, right. Just as our founding documents say, the buck stops with us being we the people, both in practice and constitutionally, theoretically. So, it's about, doing what Jefferson said, right, which is informing the discretion of the people. And my God, we've got to do a lot of informing before we could even imagine the people demanding a constitutional candidate in some of the senses you indicated.
Well, Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved." He said, "But on the contrary, when a people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." And Robin, I can tell you here today, with the utmost of confidence and absolutely no reservation, that everything that is wrong in our federal government today can be traced back to the ignorance of the American people on the Constitution and its proper operation.
Which is why what you do, KrisAnne, is so important. Now, we've only got about half a minute left in this segment. So given that you are so concerned with the education of the American people in this respect, when we come back on the other side of this break, I'd like to speak a bit more with you about Liberty University, a big project that you have begun to actually inform the discretion of we the people on what matters, a la Jefferson. We're going into the break. We'll be back soon. I am talking to my friend KrisAnne Hall, the constitutional attorney and constitutional educator. KrisAnne, as I said at the end of the last segment, I would like to speak with you about a reasonably new project that you have, Liberty University. What is it about and how does it work?
Well, it's new to everybody, but it's not new to me. This is something that we have been working on putting together for going on a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And basically, what Liberty First University will be after the first of this year, Liberty University is going to be an online set of courses teaching the Constitution. It's not going to be like the Hillsdale courses. This is actually going to go back further than Hillsdale. It's going to teach the Constitution the way I teach, not from the elite academic perspective, but the layman's terms in which our founders wanted the Constitution to be understood, so that we don't walk around thinking that the Constitution is complicated and that you have to have a PhD or you have to be a judge to understand the Constitution. That is probably one of the greatest lies perpetrated on the American people for the last 100 years, is that, you're too stupid to know the Constitution. You got to leave that to the politicians and the law professors. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring this home, and the classes are going to be established by level, and they're going to be presented in about 30-minute formats. There's going to be downloadable workbooks to go with this, and it's going to be a real grassroots kind of teaching, the things that we need to know, the basics, the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, relaying foundations so that we can be educated as a people to ask the right questions so that we can get the right answers. I think that Americans are sick of electing people who don't do their jobs. But the bottom line is, I don't think they do their jobs because they don't know what their job is. And the American people are really, really lacking on the proper job description of their representatives as well. So what we want to do is educate the people so that they can choose the right candidates, not the lesser of two evils, but people who are actually educated and able to do what they're supposed to be doing because they know what they're supposed to be doing. And not only that, we're going to be creating a crucible where we'll actually create legislators, we'll create sheriffs, we'll create county commissioners, city council, school board members, governors, attorney generals. We're going to be creating people who are ready to go into these offices with the proper education and applications of the Constitution.
You're going to make the constitutional bench. We're going to build the bench,
Absolutely.
Right? I love it. Now, somewhat related, there is a little groundswell of which I am a small part to get you in front of, or at least your work, in front of the soon-to-be new Trump administration, right? Donald Trump put out some appeal, some request for folks who could help him, well, make America great again, to use his favorite expression. And a few hundred people, I know it is by now, decided that one of the best ways to make America great again would be perhaps to use in some way, I suppose, the governmental platform to give what you're teaching some more force in our nation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's Donald Trump has put out a website called greatagain.gov in which he solicits suggestions on things that he and his new administration, his transition team, can do to help make America great again. And what has happened is I threw my hat in the ring. See, on Facebook, I'm always educating these posts, and people are telling me, KrisAnne, you need to contact Donald Trump. I have people who are constantly tweeting to Trump and his administration, and posting on their Facebook pages, you've got to get in contact with KrisAnne Hall. And I know this is happening. So anyway, I'm doing these posts, and several people said, look, KrisAnne, here's this website, greatagain.gov. Why don't you contact him and say, we have a suggestion. You want to make America great again. The only way that's going to happen is if the people themselves become educated on the Constitution and how government is supposed to work, because it's the Constitution that makes America great to begin with. And so I sort of wrote it up in that kind of manner, saying, look, I'm not looking for money. I don't want funding. I have never asked for funding. I'm going into year number 7. We've never asked for funding from anybody. I am just looking for the platform to bring this education to the people and make America great again. And so under this sort of urging and suggestion of some people on Facebook, I said, all right, fine, I'll do this. And then we decided to make it a Facebook campaign. And then it just sort of spread from there. And now we have easily over 500 people who have sent in suggestions to greatagain.gov and said, hey, we want you to look at KrisAnne Hall's teaching. We want you to look at KrisAnne. We want you to be to bring her into this transition team, to this administration in some way to bring this constitutional training to the American people.
Do you think that, I mean, I know you can't answer this, but take a punt if you can. Do you think your idea of the greatness of America significantly overlaps Donald Trump's?
Well, I don't know if it does or not, but I would like to think that the way Donald Trump presents himself as being a man who recognizes the value of good consultants, who recognizes the value of good advisors, and the fact that he is actually soliciting for suggestions to the American people. That's what I told everybody. I said, look, we can't do anything but take the man at his word right now until he proves otherwise. And so that's why I sort of thought, this is ridiculous. If I'm not willing to just step up and do this myself as well, how can I expect anybody else to do this? So I did, and that's what we're going to look at. And I think at this point, over 500 people, and we want to make this over 1,000 people. We have a video on YouTube. Dan Latramerity, who's my amazing guru, has put together this video on YouTube to teach people how to do this. We've sent out an email to our subscribers. It's been on Facebook. And so we want to see over 1,000 people do that, because I think if we make this push, I would, and I don't mean to sort of make this sound big-headed or anything, but I highly doubt that at this point any other program has had over 500 endorsements to greatagain.gov. And so what we want to do is we want to make this where it can't be ignored, where somebody's going to have to take notice. Now, where it will go, I have no idea. I'm just willing to offer my services. It's like you said, Robin, I do on average 265 events in over 22 states every single year. And I've been doing this for 6 years now. January will start year number 7. And so why wouldn't I want to volunteer at a greater degree to serve my country in its constitutional education?
Last minute or so of this segment, how do you see an administration being able to provide a platform for what you do. Do you see yourself advising the administration directly, or do you see yourself somehow being given a government platform, which is an astonishing thought, to reach more of the American public?
Well, I think that it's not unreasonable to think that there could be some kind of government endorsement. Our government endorses programs all the time. They endorse programs through the NEA. They endorse the Southern Poverty Law Center. My goodness, they have the Southern Poverty Law Center creating curriculum to teach the Department of Defense and the Department of Military, the military departments. So there are several things that I could do. I would love to be an advisor to the administration. I could create curriculum that would teach the federal government agents on the proper application of the Constitution and their proper role. I mean, there's innumerable things that I could do.
That last bit there is like a wet dream, KrisAnne. I mean, imagine doing that. It's just, we are going into the break, and you've given me the segue to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which I will be exploiting on the other side of this break. You're listening to Liberty with Love. Stairway Press is pleased to announce the publication of Robin Koerner's first book, If You Can Keep It, Why We Nearly Lost It and How We Get It Back. Jeffrey Tucker in the book's foreword wrote, "We seek to end government as we know it, but that is not the whole of what we seek. We also favor something beautiful. Explaining what this looks like and the rhetorical apparatus that necessarily accompanies this is the greatest value of Koerner's book." Barry Farber, award-winning talk show host, wrote, "Robin Koerner's political, psychological and philosophical rampage through today's America, turning on lights we didn't even know were off, takes more and more of your intellectual breath away according to how high you rated intellectually in the first place." KrisAnne Hall, constitutional attorney and educator, says, "Robin Koerner is a defender of liberty and a true lover of America's constitutional republic. The knowledge that Robin brings to his readers is sure to be instrumental in the restoration of our American foundational principles." If You Can Keep It by Robin Koerner, published by Stairway Press. Go to ifyoucankeepit.us for your pre-ordered, personally signed copy. I'm talking to the awesome KrisAnne Hall, and when we went into the break, she kindly mentioned the Southern Poverty Law Center, which I say kindly because I wanted to ask you about what it is they think of you, KrisAnne. These folks who are helping out our government, teaching them things. It would appear that they are not teaching them what you would like to teach them, the Constitution, and what it means, because apparently, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, you're some kind of dangerous anti-government extremist for believing in the Constitution, right?
Right. I have, for the second year in a row now, I have made it on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of anti-government extremist groups. So let me fill you in on the background. So they have 997 groups they've identified throughout the United States. They do an alphabetical listing by state, and I am in Florida, so I am in the Florida list. 997 groups, Robin, and me. I
was just going to say, last time I checked,
identified as a group.
Right, I was just going to say, last time I checked, there was only one of you, unfortunately, KrisAnne.
Yeah.
So they've changed the definition.
I don't know if I should be insulted, because I'm not really that big of a person.
No, you're really not. No, but some would say don't be insulted, but wear it as a badge of honor. So what's their problem then, KrisAnne? What's their problem?
Well, the Washington Post actually interviewed the director of the Southern Poverty Law Center in regards to their statements about me, Director Mark Patak. He said that I am making claims that are absolutely false. And that and let me just read the quote. He said, "She is giving people reason to believe that there are a cabal of evil malefactors in the federal government and in federal courts that are seeking to steal Americans' liberties away." He says, "So while she may not be advocating violence, there are certainly people out there who will think this is a situation that requires violence." And he says that he is, here's what they said. Oh, no, this law professor, this is the other one. There's also a law professor who said that my problem with the approach of the Constitution, his name is David Cole, who teaches law at Georgetown University, is that I ignore 240 years of history created by the Supreme Court. And so these two perspectives run together because they're very similar. the Southern Poverty Law Center says that my teaching of the Constitution, teaching what the founders intended, creates a it's really hard to describe, Robin, because they say I'm not advocating for violence, but there are people out there who think this situation requires violence. So
well, there's people out there who think that there are people out there, just to be clear, who think that the election of Trump requires violence.
Right. Which is sort of my point now. If I am an anti-government extremist group while Barack Obama is in office, then who will be on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list now that we have a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House?
Now, what actually...
anti-government groups then?
Is the list supposed to be... Is it, just strictly speaking, a list of anti-government groups? Or is it a list of anti-government groups that are inciting violence? Like, what actually is their claim about you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. They link it to violent extremist ideologies.
So that word is used in the listing somehow, somewhere, right? In the document. Is it? Violent?
Somewhere, yes. It's they have different categories, and so they have the KKK in there. They have the Black Lives Matter violent extremist ends. They have the Black Panthers in there somewhere.
Okay.
They have the neo-Nazis in there somewhere. So they don't really classify as right or left wing, just anti-government extremist. What's crazy though is how, Robin, can I be anti-government extremist if I'm actually teaching the document that creates
the government? I know. It's a great question. And I guess it's one that the folks at the Southern Poverty Law Center were not asked.
Right. Well, I don't think they could answer that question. And so, because it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. Because you know me, Robin, I am an equal opportunity butt kicker. I don't kick Obama's butt or the Democrats. I mean, I'm all over the Republicans too. I'm not very popular with them either.
You are not a partisan. Your knowledge is not distorted by an allegiance to one tribe or another, and I love that about your work.
And I am not anti-government. I am anti-lawless government. I want the government to follow the supreme law of the land. I don't want them to be outside the supreme law of the land as they have determined themselves to be.
Now, you mentioned that the guy at the Southern Poverty Law Center who's quoted in the article said that the problem with your work, or the problem with you, is that you ignore 240 years of Supreme Court precedent. But, since you have the platform, what's your answer to that?
Okay, so that was said by David Cole, who teaches constitutional law at Georgetown University. And I've actually, in the Washington Post article where he's quoted, I've actually already really answered that. He is what I classify as a federal supremacist. He is a federal supremacist who ignores the Constitution, and he relies on decisions created by the Supreme Court instead of the authority, the Constitution itself. You see, the reason that I teach the 700 years of history that created the Constitution is to combat exactly what David Cole is teaching at Georgetown University, that somehow the Constitution is mutable by 9 people in black robes. And the idea that justices over the years can alter the meaning of the Constitution in such a way that it actually practically amends the Constitution itself is just ludicrous when you take in the history and the design of the Constitution. These people like David Cole forget that the Supreme Court is part of the federal government. They forget that our founders were specifically opposed to the Supreme Court becoming a ruling body in America and becoming an oligarchy of 9 kings and queens. History proves, and our framers knew this all too well. I mean, Jefferson goes on and on about it, that it's the courts, the corruption of the court system, that is always the first mechanism of a tyrannical federal government. And so for our framers to go through the pains that they went through to gain independence from the very government of Great Britain, and then turn around and create a constitution that would reinstitute the same kind of government is just, it's just ridiculous. So I am not ignoring 240 years of history, but David Cole is ignoring over a millennia of history that has created the Constitution for what it is.
I love the way you said millennium, because that means you're going back to 1014, right?
Yes, absolutely. I always go back to 1014.
I love it. I love it. For the listeners who don't... Go ahead.
Go ahead. Here's the thing that David Cole and his ilk cannot answer. This Supreme Court that they give ultimate authority to, this Supreme Court that they hold up in a kingly kind of manner, because Cole and his ilk in the Southern Poverty Law Center will tell you, you cannot stand against the Supreme Court. They'll tell you that Supreme Court issues rulings that create law, and you can't go against them. They forget that that's the same Supreme Court that declared that men were property in the Dred Scott case, and the same Supreme Court who, as a matter of maybe not routine, but of normality, overturns previous judgments when they decide that the previous judgments were wrong. Right? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is the Supreme Court does not itself claim to speak ex cathedra. Right, and so here's the problem. When you rely on the Supreme Court to be the law, you are no longer ruled by the rule of law. You are ruled by the whim of men. And that's precisely why our Constitution was created, so that we wouldn't be tossed to and fro by the will of the people and the whim of whatever modern interpretation may be. The Constitution was created so that we would have a rule of law that would moor us to this history and this and this liberty. It's the Supreme Court, by the way, that said that we could arrest and indefinitely detain Japanese Americans in America simply because they scared us. We're talking about men, women, and children in internment camps because we were in the middle of a world war. No due process. They're American citizens, no due process, but still we have to put them in prison. This is the kind of Supreme Court that Cole and his ilk give credence and confidence to. I can't do that.
It makes a lot of sense. And let me just ask, some would say that there is some might say, they might be wishfully thinking, but they might say that there is a very good omen in the fact that somebody who does what you do even got the attention of the Washington Post. Right? I mean, if you're such an extremist, if you're such an outlier in our culture, how did they find you and why did they want to follow you?
You know, I can't really answer that question. All I can tell you is what Mr. Sullivan told me when he approached me to do this. He said, KrisAnne, I wanted to research this movement in America, this constitutional movement. And he said, everywhere I went, your name popped up. Everybody I talked to said your name or talked about your teaching or talked about one of your books. Everywhere I went. And so I thought, well, this is the place that I need to start. And I guess when you're teaching, like I do, over 265 events in over 22 states every single year for 6 years, you know, you're sort of, even on a small scale, flooding the market a little bit with what I'm doing. That's true. How did you feel about the article? Did you feel it was fair? It was very, what did you make of it? Well, you know, it is the Washington Post, so I was expecting more of a hit piece. I don't think that it was a hit piece. I believe that Mr. Sullivan did a very good job with it. I think that there's still a severe slant to it, but we're dealing with such a colossal misunderstanding and lack of understanding on how these things have to work that even people who have heard me teach, who come from the Washington Post perspective, will find some of the things a little bit hard to stomach. I mean, think about this. We're talking about confirmation bias. We're talking about this completely upsetting the foundation of how some people have been raised to believe who we are. And at some point in time, cognitive dissonance has to step in and say, you know what? If I actually take everything that she says as fact, then I have to believe everything that I have been taught is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's very difficult for people to do. I came from that perspective, Robin. I'm a recovering liberal. I in my teaching of myself, in the reading of these documents from our framers and our founders, I've come completely 180 from where I used to be. And so I understand the difficulty of setting aside everything that we've been taught. And I've watched people through my teaching. I've watched them come to these realizations. I think I look out in the audience and I see people crying when they come to the realizations of the truth and what they've been taught. I taught a college student in a Miami university, and I was teaching the genealogy of the Constitution, that history that I teach going back to 1014. And in the college classrooms, I have very limited time. So I tell them, keep your questions to the end of the class. We'll answer them after class, but we need to get through this quickly. And so I'm teaching this, and there's a young lady on the front row. She's becoming visibly agitated as I'm teaching. She's squirming in her seat, Robin. She's uncomfortable, and I see that she wants to say something, but I realize I have to keep going. So finally, I'm looking over, and her fists are clenching, and she's like lightly pounding on her desk. And I stopped. I said, "Okay, I see that something is disturbing you. Can you tell me? I mean, just what is your question? Because this is very important to you." And she stood up, Robin, and she clenched her fists at me, and she said, "Why have we been lied to our entire education?"
Short question with a long answer, isn't it?
Yeah, it really, really
What did you
is.
say? What did you say to her?
I said, well, it's difficult to explain in this type of environment, but let me ask you a question. If you put the government in charge of teaching its people, is the government going to want to teach its people that government is limited in its power by the Constitution and by the rule of law? Or are they going to want to teach its people that the rule of law is not really a written static rule, but is left to the interpretation of the government itself for its proper application? And that's where we are. And
did the penny drop? We've only got half a minute left in the segment, KrisAnne, but did the penny drop for that girl?
Oh, yeah, the penny dropped for the entire classroom.
Was there one of those moments of visible energy change, was it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it had already dropped for many of them. And for her, it obviously already had. She knew she'd been lied to. But you see, the way I present this stuff, Robin, is not my opinion. It's not my interpretation. I use the words of history and fact to teach the class. And you cannot dispute that.
And we're going into the break. Nicely timed, KrisAnne. We will be back shortly. Once again, an hour on this show has gone very fast. I love talking to KrisAnne. So, KrisAnne, thanks for being on the show. This is the final segment. We just have a couple of minutes to the end of the show. So if you just want to summarize the stuff that you're doing right now and where people can go to follow you, to find that stuff if they're interested in this work.
So first, the hub of everything that I do is KrisAnneHall.com, KrisAnnehall.com. Like I said, I teach over 265 events in over 22 states every single year. I am probably going to be somewhere near where your people are listening. We're actually working on a trip to the UK to teach over there. Boris Johnson fell in love with my Brexit article. And
I love that. Really?
Yes, he did.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. I was very pleased with that. You would have liked I don't know if you saw my Brexit article, but you would like it. It was very historical. And so I've been invited to go to Peru to teach at a women's conference there. So we're really going global. The radio show that I do that broadcasts 6 days a week is global as well. I have, the coolest thing, I love saying this, I have 52 people in Ghana, West Africa that listen to my radio show every single day. Without fail, 52 people. I think that is so cool.
That is very cool. It's very, very cool. And you said every single day. You actually do a daily show, don't you?
I do. I do a daily show Monday through Friday, which is the new show is Monday through Friday, plus it's broadcast Sunday as well. We have a Sunday edition show. I have 5 books. My most recent book, Sovereign Duty, teaches what our founders wanted us to do to get the federal government under control. This is the book that teaches why the Supreme Court is not the supreme law of the land. And not only that, if you get the book Sovereign Duty, you get all my research too. So every quote and every document cited in the book is referenced in the back to its original source text. So I give you all my research in this book.
That was the 3rd edition, I think, of the rebranded Liberty with Love with Robin Koerner. Thank you for listening. And, get in touch at libertytalk.fm if you have any guests that you want to hook me up with or hear on the show. And, of course, go to libertytalk.fm for old shows in the archive. And don't forget, also, please, once you've bought KrisAnne's book, Sovereign Duty, go to ifyoucankeepit.us and buy my book, because the two go together beautifully.
Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. libertytalk.fm.